Well, as I suspect you all know, based upon the national news and the currents of social media, today is my birthday. It's true, wasn't yesterday, isn't tomorrow, this is it. And not only is it my birthday today, a day upon which I have to work, but it's also a kind of special birthday because today I am 65. This is the day where the culture says I am now officially something, over the hill, old, beyond hope or redemption. I'm not sure what, but I have now received my Medicare card. I've got it in my wallet. Actually, I've had it all month long. I guess it's good the beginning of the month that you turn 65, but it's a strange feeling to be carrying this card that makes you a ward of the state. Now, the truth is, I still feel pretty good. I feel about the same as I did yesterday when I was just 64. I don't notice a huge big difference. I won't tell you that it feels exactly like I did when I was 35. I notice now that when I get down on the floor to play with my grandchildren, I have the same ability to get down, but not quite as much strength to get back up. And I'm told it's not quite as pretty a sight as 30 years ago. Things do change. I think the days when I was able to stay up easily to midnight and beyond, reading in bed, trying not to disturb people on the other side of the bed who work for a living, I'm now lucky to make it till it's dark. It's getting easier, thankfully, as the time gets a little easier, but things do change, and yet, on the whole, feel pretty good. Now, Karen makes this transition tomorrow. See, I am one day older, which I've always said is remarkable, the extent of wisdom and maturity represented in that one day of advantage. But there's also some downside, encapsulated in the fact that you may not know this about my good wife, but she doesn't like chocolate. Can you imagine? Just can't, she's a shock there, but it's true. She doesn't much care for chocolate. And so, because our birthdays were one day apart, for the 43 years and plus of marriage, we've only ever had one birthday cake. Always seemed tough to kind of have back-to-back cakes. What do you do with two birthday cakes 2 days apart? So we've always shared a cake. Even from the early days, her mother would bake us a cake. But since she didn't like chocolate, I've got a lot of white cakes with white icing. Yeah. Always kind of made me understand how children feel whose birthday are on Christmas. You know, you kind of have that sense that you're getting the short end of the stick, but you don't have real evidence of it. But that's kind of where I am with birthday cakes, I think. All of which is making me think a bit about the aging process, and maybe inviting you to think about it with me today. I've discovered that there's not a lot of emphasis upon it that I can see in Scripture, but there are some interesting passages, some of which I asked some friends to join me in reading this morning. There is, for example, from that 5th chapter of Genesis, the story of Methuselah. The oldest man in the Bible, the oldest man on earth, the history of earth, I guess, 969. Now, because it is the 5th chapter of Genesis, it falls in that part of Genesis that's called prehistory. None of those events are easily datable. They're not what people call history, and they're not really mythology. They are what the literary experts call sagas. And Methuselah's story falls into that. So we don't quite know what to make of that, literally, whether 969 years was the same as our 969 years. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. It is kind of interesting to think about, what would it be like to live to be 1,000? Not forget 100, 1,000. If you were nearing 1,000 years of age, you would have been born roughly at the time of the Battle of Hastings, when the Normans invaded England. You would have lived through the invention of the printing press, through the Renaissance, through the Reformation, through the colonization of America. All of that would have been part of your lifetime had you lived to be 1,000. My hunch is that a lot of folks, if asked about this possibility, would respond by saying, I think I'll pass. But you know what I've discovered in 40 plus years of ministry is that even the people who say, I don't think I want to live that long, when as a matter of fact the time draws near, they have a way of holding on pretty tightly to each day and each hour and each moment. Life is a precious thing. And then there's Psalm 90. This is one of my favorites. I use it in a lot of funeral settings. Psalm 90 is where the psalmist says, our span of life is 70 years, maybe 80, by virtue of strength. Now, this, see, is from the Psalms. It's not dated. We don't know exactly when it was written. The scholar's best guess is that it was sometime during the exile, which was about 600 or so BC. So about 2,600 years ago. And isn't it interesting to think about how little life expectancy has changed in 2,600 years? For all of our medical technology and advancement, for all of our discoveries and vaccines and all of the rest of it, our life expectancy's only a smidgen different. If I were to say to you, what do you think is a good span of life, and what would you say is an average span of life made possible by strength, you might not say 70 or 80, but what would you say? 80, maybe 90 or 95 by virtue of strength. That's not a huge, big difference for 2,600 years. Although it does appear from the evidence that the life expectancy scales have not been a constant movement up. I did a little scanning on the internet this week and just had some fun with numbers. Found out the life expectancy in 1850. Think about that. That was about a decade before the Civil War. What was the lifespan in 1850 of a white American male, me? What would have been my expected lifespan then? This is where we might get a little bit interactive. This is where I kind of see who's been really paying attention and who's still awake. And I'm always worried about Sankey kind of being back there in that cove and you can't see him and you don't really know what he's up to. So, Jim, this question is for you. What was the lifespan, do you think, of a white American male in 1850? 48, he said, and he is quite correct. Absolutely right. 48. 48 years of age. Now, by the turn of the century, in the year 1900, we had galloped all the way up to Carol McKnight. Take a guess. 1900. 50. Absolutely correct again. These people are right on the money. Only went up 2 years to 50. Yeah. And by the year of my birth, 1951, life expectancy was 59. 59. Wow. That wasn't so awfully long. That was about 65 years ago. Yeah. Life expectancy of 59. All of which kind of makes me feel pretty fortunate today to be where I am and able to talk to you at all. And I don't suppose we ought to lose sight of that. That every day of our lives, at whatever age we are, is an unmerited gift. None of us had to be here, and it's a rather significant miracle that we are. Gratitude ought to be the order of the day, whether it's our birthday or not. Which is not to say that the sands of the hourglass aren't numbered. Everybody will die. Even Christians die. Sometimes I'm surprised a little bit when I hear faithful people speak as if our faith grants us some kind of immunity from the troubles and sufferings and even the final end of life. It does not. I mean, when you think about it, Jesus died, he was just 33, and not a very pleasant death at that. We don't know how old Paul was when he met his end, probably as a martyr under the reign of Emperor Nero in Rome, but he probably wasn't elderly. And according to tradition, 11 of the 12 original disciples died unnaturally. So if such a fate could befall them, what is it that leads us to say that no troubles should be ours? Life is hard, and it is relatively short. A reality that we sometimes try to avoid facing. One of my favorite sayings, you've probably heard me say it, is everybody knows they're going to die, and nobody really believes it. It's true. So live each day as if it were your last. Well, the problem with that is nobody's got the energy or the resources to pull that off. You'd get tired of that pretty quickly. And as a matter of fact, having been one diagnosed with cancer and for 5 days waiting for the pathology report and not knowing what it would be, let me tell you that if you think you're nearing the end, you don't feel much like partying, no matter what you might think. Perhaps just living the gift and receiving it as a gift is a sufficient place to begin. And once in a while to take note of Abram, later known as Abraham, but initially known as Abram. His story starts in the 12th chapter of Genesis. That's just past the prehistory part. We now know how old Abram really was. And it says in the text that the call of God came to Abram when he was, did you catch that in the reading? 75 years of age. Now, maybe 75 was a little different in those days, even still from ours, but it must have been getting up there because you'll remember a little later in the story, 25 years later, Abraham becomes a father. He's 100. His wife's just 90. And when the word comes that they're going to have a child, Sarah starts to laugh. I have a feeling there might have been a few tears in that laughter too, but it says that she laughed, and so the child to be born was to be called laughter, Yitzhak. Hebrew, it means Isaac, one who laughed. 75 when the call of God comes, and here I am merely 65. Maybe it's just a reminder that God isn't as arbitrary about age as we are, and he doesn't automatically send out Medicare cards whenever the magic date arrives. Because maybe what he does is he uses who he will, just as he will, whenever he wills, however he wills, and that it's important to just live until we die, that we just stay as active as we can, even in retirement, as best we can for as long as we can. The end, of course, will come, and truth is, it'll probably come before most of us are ready and willing, but come it will. But if we live as fully as possible till then, being appreciative and living into that appreciation, maybe when that end comes, the undertaker will find it somewhat difficult to wipe the smile from our face. And the preacher, not having to lie, as occasionally I've had to do, the preacher not having to lie will be able to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant."